The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. It's time for Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. We'll talk all things Hokie wrestling with Coach Tony Robie and staff. Now, let's join your host, Hall of Fame wrestling writer and broadcaster, Jason Bryant.
Episode 83 of Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. Jason Bryant here with you. Going to take a visit to Blacksburg, Virginia. After we've had a little hiatus from Coach Tony Robie, we've had Jared Frayer, Mekhi Lewis on the program the last couple episodes, obviously for obvious reasons why. But Coach Robie, one, welcome back to the program, and two, congratulations on your first individual national champion, not just in school history, but for yourself as a head coach.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Obviously, it was an exciting. Everybody, I think, that witnessed it either in person or witnessed it on ESPN, and their coverage was fantastic. Was really excited. It had a ton of Virginia Tech Hokie wrestling fans, and just I think a lot of Virginia Tech fans in general that tuned in and were able to see Mekhi Lewis make history a couple weeks ago in Pittsburgh. So it was a big deal for Mekhi personally. It was a big deal for our program and kind of getting that checked off our list of goals, and it was absolutely exciting to watch also. So we were excited about it, and it was a pretty cool deal.
One thing I was thinking about as I went back and rewatched the finals, because with you there, you don't really get to see what ESPN does with it, but the shot of Mekhi's parents jumping up and down just in the background, but they are decked out, big old VT. You can't really ask for a better marketing campaign than having two big giant VTs right there in the background as a guy wins a national championship.
Yeah, I mean, I like I said, kudos to ESPN. I thought the coverage for the entire event was awesome, but especially for the finals, and it really played well for Virginia Tech. I think not only with Mekhi's parents being in the background, wearing their VT shirts, but the VT fan section right there going crazy. At one point, you could hear the fans chanting, "Let's go Hokies." From a coverage standpoint and from a marketing standpoint, it was a great day for Virginia Tech athletics and Virginia Tech wrestling. The reaction that we got when we came back, and we're still getting over the course of the last few weeks, just from people in the community, people that are Hokie fans, has just been tremendous. I mean, it's I think one of the highlights in VT athletics in a long time for sure.
One thing that we're coming up upon, and we just passed the 12-year anniversary of the tragic events that happened back in 2007. Of course, you don't really have to go into detail on what we're talking about, but 12 years have passed, and there's a deep scar there. There's been a lot of healing. There's been a lot of reflection usually when this anniversary comes up. And, I guess take us back to what the situation was like, and, what has happened, not just with the wrestling program, but the school as a whole from your perspective since what happened 12 years ago.
Well, I was we just finished our first season here at Virginia Tech, and my office was kind of secluded in Castle Coliseum, and obviously it was a very emotional day, but kind of what I remember from that is I was in my office working, and I had no idea what had transpired, what was taking place. And at some point, a fellow employee came in and had to tell me that they were evacuating campus and exactly what was going on. So at that point, got in my car, left campus, and watched a lot of it transpire, just like everybody else on TV. But I guess for me, the one thing that I always go back to is it seemed like a very surreal experience. It was really difficult to comprehend that this was actually taking place at Virginia Tech on this campus. I mean, for anybody who's been here, and I'm sure everybody who's listening to this podcast has been to Virginia Tech, or at least the majority of them have, this is the last place in the world you would expect something like that to happen. I think as we've seen over the course of the last decade or so that, these kind of events can happen anywhere. But at the time it was fairly uncommon, especially on that magnitude. But again, I felt like I was watching something almost like it was a movie, that it wasn't real, that it didn't really happen. And it took a long time for that to kind of set in. It was an incredibly emotional time, I think, for everybody who was connected to Virginia Tech or was here. And, I was relatively new to the school and didn't quite have the connection that I do now. But I think through that event and through the outpouring of support that Virginia Tech received, and I think the way that the Virginia Tech community stepped up and kind of handled that event and wrapped their arms around it, really connected me, and I think my family and a lot of people in a much deeper, more emotional way to the university and to this place. And I think it's, was definitely part of this history when I look back at my time here. That's, something that you think about a lot, and it's a lot of time has passed. I think Virginia Tech does a fantastic job of honoring and remembering those 32 victims that lost their lives that day and their family. And it's really become I hate to use the word special, but it's become a day that I think a lot of people, just recall and remember what happened. And, I think it's something that Virginia Tech has handled really well. And I know at the time for us, there was a lot of things that you take into consideration, and it was really a crazy day, and just the events that took place afterward. Nikki Giovanni spoke in Castle Coliseum, and the President of the United States was there, and me and Coach Dresser were both in attendance for that event. She gave a incredible speech that I'll never forget, and it was, like I said, it was a really emotional day. So it's part of the history of Virginia Tech.
How often does that come up when recruits are touring campus? I mean, is that something, at this point, they were 6, 7 years old when this happened, so the memory may not be as fresh as some people, but, how often does it get brought up when you bring a recruit on campus?
Almost never. Obviously in the years prior or after that, it would come up often, and it was something that we would talk about. But I think so much time has passed that, like you said, a lot of these kids that we're recruiting were, 6, 7 years old when that event took place. So occasionally you'll have a parent ask about it. And when we go, there's a memorial right in front of Birth Hall that we drive by, and sometimes we'll discuss. But the further you get away from it, the less it seems to come up.
Moving on to happier news, is we got a big announcement here. This is the questions about the coaching position are being answered, Coach Robie, and I believe you've got some news for us.
Yeah, we're really excited to announce that we've hired Cody Brewer as our assistant coach here at Virginia Tech. Cody was a 4-time All-American and a national champion at 133 pounds at Oklahoma. For the last 3 years, he's been coaching in the Big Ten at Northwestern, has played an instrumental role in the development of Sebastian Rivera, who's, burst onto the scene in college wrestling and was a guy that, quite frankly, I didn't know a lot about coming out of high school. And most kids that come in and place as freshmen and are, contending for national titles is as a sophomore, you know who they are in high school. And I didn't know a lot about Sebastian Rivera. So I think, Cody Brewer, from everything that's, we've learned over the course of this hiring process, played an instrumental role in his development. So we're really excited to have Cody. He's a great kid. He's got tremendous passion for the sport of wrestling. He's coming to Virginia Tech for, because he thinks we can be contending for a national title, and that's what he wants to be a part of. So I think he feels like it's a great move for him and his fiancée and future in his career as a wrestling coach. I know he's excited to get here and get to work and start working with our lightweights. We've got a lot of great lightweights in the program currently, and a lot of really good ones that'll be coming in the next couple of years that we have as recruits. So I know that was something that he was really excited about as well. So I've gotten to know Cody pretty well here over the course of the last several weeks, and have been really impressed with him, and I think everything that he's going to bring to the table for us. So it's definitely a good move for our program.
How's the process of hiring a coach at this point in the year? What's that like?
Well, we kind of waited until the season was over. Obviously, we didn't. We felt like that was our best chance of getting the best people interested. So we definitely put some feelers out there during the course of the season, and had talked to some people, and kind of started to put a list of guys together that we would have interest in. And then as soon as the season was over, started reaching out to people that we thought might have some interest. And from there, you have some conversations. You talk about some of the details. You gauge people's interest, and then you start bringing them on campus. So Cody was very, very high on our list of guys that we wanted to go after. So for us to be able to go out and secure somebody like that, the process worked out really well. So he came out last week to visit campus and check things out, and I think in his mind, based on our conversations prior to coming out, that if things were going to work out, he was going to take the position, and was excited about it. So it was, it went really well.
So the makeup of the staff is you, Frayer, Cody Brewer, Ty Wall staying on as a volunteer assistant, I'm assuming?
Correct.
And Devin Carter's Dr. Devin Carter. I don't know if he's officially been named a doctor yet, but, talk about what he did to step in there. I know it was a tough spot for him and in busy time, but, what was it like to have Devin back a part of the coaching staff again?
It was great. I've said this before. I've got a very close personal relationship with Devin, so just to have him around our program, and for me was pretty cool. He's somebody that I've known since he was in ninth grade, and watched him wrestle through high school and develop into one of the elite wrestlers in the country, and then come to Virginia Tech and really take our program to the next level. I think Devin's as responsible as anybody for getting Virginia Tech to being knocking on the door to being a consistent top 10 team, and then kind of passing the torch on to guys like Ty Walls and Nick Barcetta and a lot of those guys that helped us get into the fourth and then sixth, and and kind of elevate our program. So Devin, he brought a lot to the table just in terms of his the way he would go about practice every day. It was pretty impressive to watch him come in here and just compete and wrestle and wrestle against really good guys. Devin's a guy that will wrestle anybody in the room. He'd wrestle Zach Zavatsky, he'd wrestle David McFadden, Makai Lewis, Hunter Bolin, and he was a 141 pounder in college, and he's getting his PhD, and his shape, especially at first, wasn't good, but he'd just go out there and throw it out there, and his toughness is off the charts. So I think it was great to have him as an example for our guys to kind of lead the way in terms of what it takes, and he's got some really good perspective on competition. I think obviously having multiple degrees in psychology doesn't hurt him in terms of helping our guys with the mental side of things too, and we were grateful that Devin was able to step in and fill that role, and I think he helped us.
As we move to this season, what's coming up, or this past season, we got some questions. I actually went out to Tech Sideline and on Twitter to solicit some questions from Hokie Nation, and pretty pleased with the response. Of course, that last question, kind of my own, but also I got to throw Jersey Hokie 29 a little plug. I think last time I mentioned the question, I mentioned his real name, and he didn't like that. So just Jersey Hokie 29. He is a real person, by the way. So another question as it relates to this season, and it was a question about conditioning. And it's come from Mark Denterman that the conditioning, it seemed like it was hit or miss at some points, at least the perspective from the fan base. What did you see from conditioning year long, and what was trying to be done to correct it if you did see it as a problem?
Yeah, I think we had some guys, and I don't know so much if it was conditioning. I think some of it was just mental, with their mental approach and how they finished matches. I think, when you put the brakes on, you tend to get tired, and it's less of a physical thing and more of a mental thing. And I think we definitely had some guys that fell victim to that a little bit. I will say this much. I think some of our better guys would, and Mekhi Lewis, I think, is a good example of this, and even McFadden to a certain degree, when they'd go out and they would attack early, they would attack often, they would score points, and in the process of going out and trying to get majors, sometimes I think it was more of them juicing themselves than getting tired by their opponent. And some of it was mentality, but I think in Mekhi's case, I think you saw at the Nationals when guys come out and wrestle him, he's more effective. I think when guys put the brakes on and guys, all they're trying to do is keep the match close. He goes out and wasn't maybe as efficient with his energy as he could have been, and a lot of times would, kind of juice himself in a lot of cases. So I think that played into it. But yeah, it was definitely something that I think it's an area we need to get better in. We recognize that as coaches, and I think that we did a good job peaking at the right time of the season and doing our best wrestling at the end of the season. So that's part of it a little bit too, but it's definitely something that we're going to try to improve upon, and we will improve upon next year. And a lot of it's just a mentality.
Going with the emphasis in this summer, Christian Case asking, what's one area of improvement you plan on emphasizing with the entire team during summer training and future workouts?
I think kind of like we talked about, developing that mentality where we're scoring the whole time. And I think from just a wrestling specific area, I think our top bottom wrestling, specifically our bottom wrestling, needs to improve and get better. So those are definitely some areas that we target. I feel like on our feet, we can compete with most guys and most teams. We're pretty good in that area, but our bottom needs to improve. And it's something I think looking back on last off season that we probably neglected a little bit, mostly due to the fact that we really focused on the freestyle wrestling, and obviously when you're working freestyle wrestling and you're working parterre, you're not working on getting away from somebody. That's the biggest difference in the styles of wrestling. So looking back on that and evaluating our off season last year, I think that we could have done a better job working on our bottom position. So it's something we've already addressed and are starting to address, and we will continue to address throughout the course of the season. We may not have as many guys wrestling in the freestyle events as we have in the past, and that's part of the reason why. We want to really focus on our folk style wrestling. We'll have our guys that we feel like can compete nationally and have an opportunity to make world teams and make win world medals. Will definitely compete in freestyle, but some of those other guys that are maybe still developing, we may not focus quite as much on the freestyle with them.
Kind of a follow-up here, a question from John Barry, kind of asking, which freestyle events will the Southeast RTC be competing in this summer?
We're sending 3 guys out to the U.S. Open. As of right now, that can always change. But right now, John Borst and Cody Howard are going to wrestle juniors, and then Hunter Boland is going to wrestle in the open division. So those guys, and then obviously Coach Walls, and we may have one other surprise competitor. So you'll just have to wait and see.
Oh, so keeping us in the dark there on the Coach's Show. Coach Speak. No, did have another follow-up in regards to the Southeast Regional Training Center. I understand we're approaching the end of the fiscal year in terms of that, and the end of April. So just talk about a little bit about what Hokie Nation and fans of the SCRTC can do to help with that fundraising drive.
Well, I just think, with the importance that the Southeast Regional Training Center plays in the development of wrestling, and in particular with some, guys in our program. The mission of the Southeast Regional Training Center is to promote wrestling in the state of Virginia and particularly in Southwest Virginia. So I think it benefits a lot of our athletes. We've opened it up to high school kids, so we have some high school kids that are coming in and that are training with us as well in our RTC workouts. But it's a huge part of the whole overall program that we have here at Virginia Tech to continue to bring in elite level resident athletes to train and live in Blacksburg. It creates opportunities for guys to go to the U23s. It creates opportunities for guys to go to the Olympic Training Center. I think if you look at Makai's development over the course of his redshirt year, and everybody knows about him winning a junior world title, but what they may not know is that he had an opportunity during Christmas break of his true freshman year to go out to the Olympic Training Center and wrestle with guys like Kyle Dake, go to a national team camp and wrestle with Kyle Dake and wrestle with David Taylor, and then he had another opportunity to go back out there in the summer. So all of that stuff, in having those resources and that program available to the athletes in this area is a huge benefit. And the experiences that they get because of those opportunities, it shows up, and it showed up in Pittsburgh when Makai stepped on the mat. I mean, I think if Makai doesn't have that opportunity to go out and wrestle at the Junior Worlds, who knows how things would have turned out. I think that just whole experience and the confidence that he gained from that and the composure that he gained from that really lent itself to him achieving what he achieved in Pittsburgh. And whether it's the Hockey Club or whether it's the Southeast Regional Training Center, we need to continue to get people behind Virginia Tech wrestling and supporting us, not only with their support at matches and fan support, but also financially helping us get to where we need to be and continue to close the gap on the programs that are currently ahead of us.
And how can they do that? Where can they go and make those contributions?
Well, we've got a website. If you just go to southeastrtc.com, we've got a great website that's really informative. I did a conference call shortly after I got hired that's on the website that you can listen to. So if you don't know or you don't quite understand exactly why that organization is important or what it does, you can go on and you can listen to that conference call. There's all kinds of information on the Southeast RTC website. You can also donate there. There's a form if you'd rather mail it in. You can write a check and mail it in, but it is a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible, within the IRS parameters. But I think that's where you would go to get all that information.
Best nation in the world, donation. No, just kidding. As we move on now, back to you kind of touched on this when Makai Lewis talked about his redshirt year where he had the opportunity to go out in the Olympic Training Center. He was a guy that was waiting in the wings, and Christian Case has another follow-up question asking which current Hokies are waiting in the wings for their moment, whether they be a redshirt or somebody that's just kind of there waiting for their spot in the lineup.
So I think, this year you saw a lot of what we have. I think we had Mitch Moore wrestled as a true freshman, Cody Howard redshirted. We had some other guys that were solid. Colin Girardi was a really solid redshirt for us. So, but to me, I think, we've got a lot of really good young guys, but I'm really excited about the direction and not saying anything negative about those guys. They did a great job for us, and I think they're going to be really good. I'm excited to see what we have with this freshman class coming in. They'll arrive on campus in July to start summer classes, and then they can start training here in Blacksburg at Virginia Tech. But if you look at, the recruiting class that we have coming in with Sam Latona and Bryce Andonian and Connor Brady and a kid named Dan Mancini out of Pennsylvania, and just a lot of, Colton Clark. We've got a lot of good guys coming in. Our junior recruiting class, and we can't mention names, is shaping up to be phenomenal, and we're hopeful that we're going to be able to add another guy to that class here really, really soon. So it's just I think there's a lot of guys, and it may be 2 or 3 years down the road that are going to be making a lot of noise for Virginia Tech.
Line of questions that we got came in, a lot of it based on recruiting, because that seems to be where a lot of it that's something that doesn't just end with the wrestling season. The recruiting season goes continually. So first one from John G via Twitter, asking, is it difficult to get wrestlers to come to a program where there's going to be someone in front of them that makes them sit for a couple years? For example, trying to recruit a 165-pounder where Makai Lewis just finished up his redshirt freshman year.
Yeah, I think it's a coach, when you're looking at your needs for recruiting, it doesn't make a lot of sense to go out and sign a kid, especially if you're investing, a lot of scholarship money into somebody that's going to be a 165 pounder and that, would likely not be in the starting lineup for 2 years. So, there's a little bit of a business aspect to it in terms of, we have 10 scholarships that we can divide up any way that we want, 9.9 actually, but essentially 10. And you got to fulfill your needs. When you go out and you get a blue chip recruit, they're not coming here and walking on to Virginia Tech, especially if they're out of state student and paying $45,000 a year to come to school here. There's a lot of, oftentimes you're giving them a significant amount of scholarship. And, so we try to balance it out. We try to meet the needs of what our team is. And we try to forecast that 2 or 3 years down the road and make sure that we have a balanced team. And that's not always an easy thing. That's a challenge, and that plays into it too. But I think the best kids in the country don't mind the competition. I think, it's a little bit different if a kid was coming in next year and has to beat Mackay out, that's a little bit of a challenge. But, I think we try to get kids that are competitive, that aren't afraid of competition, that aren't looking to just walk into a position. And I think we've done a good job with that.
In regards to recruiting upper weights, this question's coming from Brian League. It looks like the size of the kids that are coming in and wrestling heavyweight, they're smaller in terms maybe that 215, 220 range in terms of weight. And more athletic, as opposed to maybe like a full size 280-pound heavyweight. Is that a strategy, or is that just what's there?
Heavyweight's a little bit different. Definitely. I mean, it's a hard. I'll tell you this much. I think a lot of coaches would tell you this too. It's not an easy weight to recruit, and whenever there's a good heavyweight out there, everybody and their brother is recruiting them. It's kind of like defensive linemen in football. They're just they're not easy to find. So when you do find one, for us, we've had success with smaller guys, a little bit smaller guys, a little bit more athletic guys. Ty Walls obviously, was just tremendous for us, and replacing him is not easy. So, I don't know that we go out and look for guys that are bigger or smaller. I typically like to get guys that are good athletes, that can attack, can score some points. I mean, that's typically what we look for in our guys when we're recruiting. But when it comes to heavyweight, I mean, we'll take, if they can get their hand raised and they can win, we're going to recruit them.
Jason Cole sent in a number of questions. One of his centers around transfers, and since you're not likely to mention any specific names, are there any transfer prospects like last year, or is that something that the transfer portal has kind of opened up and changed the recruiting process when it comes to, all right, we had 3 transfers in the lineup last year?
Yeah, I think so. I think the transfer portal it certainly made it really transparent. So, if kids are looking to leave, we check the transfer portal pretty much daily to see if there's any new names or anybody in there that we think could help us. I will say this much. It seems like it's slowed down. Last year there was a lot of transfers, and this year, at least so far, you haven't seen quite as many guys putting their name in the transfer portal. So, as of right now, I don't anticipate us having, bringing anybody in who's a transfer from another Division I school. But who knows? That could change.
And Rob Jordan from Twitter asking, what is the current recruiting plan and the plan in the future?
The plan is kind of what it always is. You have to identify your needs, and a lot of how your recruiting classes play out is dictated by how much scholarship money you may have in that particular year. So our first year here, we didn't have a ton of scholarship money to spend just because we didn't have a lot of seniors graduating. So, we had a smaller class this past year with our incoming class. It's a fairly large class because we had 4 seniors in the lineup this year. 3 of them are transfers, but they're all leaving the program. So you have a lot of money that open up. But really what we try to do is number one, you have to identify your needs and identify what areas you feel like you need to fill weight class wise. And then you go after the top kids in the country, and, we try to start pretty broad, and we try to narrow it relatively quickly in terms of kids that we feel like are going to be a good fit for us, are going to fit into our program, and that have a strong interest in Virginia Tech. And I think when we sink our teeth into a kid that we really, really want, and whether it be a kid that's ranked really high in the country or maybe not ranked as high in the country, I feel like we've had a pretty high success rate in being able to go out, recruit these kids hard, develop the relationship with these kids. And that's really what it's about. I think at the end of the day, the kids and the parents really want to know what kind of person you are, what kind of people you have in your program, and how that relationship is going to build during their time while they're at Virginia Tech, and they have to be comfortable with that. So, that's kind of what our approach is. We try to go see these kids. You're allowed three off-campus contacts with them, either at their home or at their high school. So a lot of times, 2 or 3 times during their junior year, myself or another one of our coaches will go see them. You try to get them on campus as often as possible, get them around the team, get them comfortable, and go from there. So that's kind of what our strategy is. But a lot of it is really, I think the success of recruiting depends a lot upon you as a coach and as a person, you being able to go in there, develop that relationship, develop that comfort level, and get them to believe that they can accomplish their goals at your school.
So kind of in that same vein, another question that's again coming in from Jason Cole. Would you ever sacrifice a solid nationals finish for the opportunity to have a trophy team? For example, like not necessarily quote unquote tank a year, but like, okay, we're going to redshirt these guys. We're going to build this. We're going to make that run for the next year.
That's a good question. I mean, it's hard to answer right now. I mean, I think I'm going to do what's, I think, the right thing for the kid a lot of times and the athlete. We're going to, if there's tremendous need there, like redshirt and Mackay his first year, he probably could have wrestled for us, but we felt like it was good for him to sit in red shirt, and it was the right move. But that's tough to answer. Obviously, having the opportunity to win team trophies and place really high at the NCAA tournament is something that is important to us. So you have to balance all those.
Now, when it comes to the lineup, there's some already some chatter. I mean, a lot's got to be done in between. But looking at both Moores in the lineup next year, and then Howard and Borst at 197 and 285.
Yeah, I mean, there's a strong possibility of that. Yeah, hard to say as of right now. We don't even have this true freshman class in here yet. But I think if you're looking at it on paper, that makes sense.
Couple questions that talk about resources and such. One, again, from Jason Cole, I got to give him some credit. He came up with some pretty good questions here. So, Virginia Tech's become a wrestling power, and Blacksburg is a special support type of place that could turn into a wrestling town. Would you or the university consider charging small fee for the duels at Castle? For example, free to kids and students, but $3 to $5 for adults. He says, he'll be upping his donation. So that's a plug for what we had talked about earlier, but kind of feels guilty watching athletes for free, even though if 1,000 people paid $3, that money could go to the program. So kind of, I guess, explain the attendance situation and the how things are charged with home duels at Castle.
Well, that's a good question. And I tweeted out a graphic last night. We were number 8 in average attendance this year. And, pretty much all Big Ten and Big 12 and kind of traditional powers mostly ahead of us. So, when it actually hurts our attendance our average attendance having a match at the Moss Arts Center because it only seats 1,000 people. We average about 2,500. So as far as charging is concerned, that's definitely something that we have talked about and our administration has talked about. But to me, I don't know. I mean, I like the fact I'm not so much concerned about the money. I think it's a relatively insignificant amount of money. I like the fact that we get a lot of people to come to our matches. Whether that would affect that or not, I don't know, if we charged a little bit. But, I think the fact that it's free and the fact that we continue to get record-setting crowds makes me a little bit more hesitant to change what we have in place right now. At the end of the day, it's just about your following and getting people excited about it and people coming to the matches and supporting the program. program. And I think, they support it in a lot of other ways, even if they're not buying tickets. A lot of people are giving financially to our program, and they're showing up for all the events. They're, supporting us at the NCAA tournament. So, I like kind of the model that we have right now. So I'm a little bit hesitant to make any changes.
Next question coming from Isan Abisab asking, is there a resource you don't currently have in the program at Virginia Tech that other programs may have that would help you most compete? And is that attainable?
I think, if you look at the resources that the top programs in the country have, the Penn States, the Ohio States, the Oklahoma States, they have multiple positions. They have recruiting coordinators. They have a lot of things that we don't have. They have facilities that are, some of the best in the world, and they're ahead of us in a lot of places in terms of that. So, it's an arms race, and you can never have too many resources. So, for us, that's, part of what we talked about earlier, and the fundraising part of it is really, really important to us. Virginia Tech, supports us at a really high level, and it keeps getting better and better every single year. And Whit Babcock is 100% behind the sport of wrestling. But, if you look at just athletic budgets in general, Ohio State's athletic budget is probably more than $200 million a year. And, and ours isn't. So, we are competing on a slightly different playing field than some of the top dogs. I do think we're in a position where we certainly have enough to be really successful in the sport of wrestling. More is always better. There's no question about that. But I think we're getting there, and we're closing that gap. Hopefully, in time here, the ACC network and a lot of that stuff's going to help a lot as well.
Final fan question is again from Jason Cole, and this is what I wanted to save for the last fan question because to me it's probably the most intriguing one that we got. Wrestlers are dedicated, disciplined people. What could you have seen yourself doing for a career had it not been for the sport of wrestling?
Wow, that's a heck of a question. I don't know. I could see myself being, owning some kind of business. I like having the accountability of something being my own. I think I really can dig into something like that. In what area or what it would be, really don't know. Wrestling is my passion, and it's something. Coaching is something that I spend a lot of time on, and building this program and maintaining this program, and probably more time than my wife would like. But I like to have something that I feel like is my own. So I guess the best answer for that is I'd love to have my own business of some sort if I wasn't coaching wrestling.
Now, the last thing I want to touch on this episode is we've wrapped up the season. We talked to Jared Frayer about the senior All-Americans and the guys that have come through in place. But let's just talk about the senior class as a whole. What did this group mean to Virginia Tech wrestling, and what are you going to miss most about them?
We have our banquet on Saturday, so we have 6 seniors that are leaving our program, and 3 of them are transfers. So, and 2 of them are only here for a year. So it's a little bit odd, right? It's, they weren't here their entire careers. I think they wish they would have been here their entire careers. I think they, Billy and Tom and Ryan Blease all had awesome experiences at Virginia Tech. But, Zach Zavatsky, I think, is a guy that's really made a huge impact on our program. I think Zach stepped in as a freshman and, kind of was in it right away. And, he was, I don't think he was ever seeded lower than 5th or 6th at the NCAA tournament. He might have been either, 3rd through 6th his entire career, 3rd through 5th. So I think Zach was somebody who came in and was able to compete on that level right away. So I think he kind of changed the mindset a little bit for guys that were behind him, like David McFadden and Makai Lewis, that they didn't really have to wait to get to that level. And I think that's part of the legacy that Zach left. But overall, I just with Brooks Wilding and Ryan Haskett and Zach Zavatsky, Tom Slade, Billy Miller, Ryan Blease, they're all outstanding people, great students, great representatives of Virginia Tech, people that, as a coach, you'd love to have around your program, involved in your program, whether their contribution was wrestling, whether it was academic, whether it was just contributing to our environment, with their character, with how they represented our program. I think those guys all are really, really special and have set the bar really high in terms of those areas. So, we're going to miss these guys. They did an outstanding job for us, and really all of them personally I've become really close with. So, it's always tough, but you've been coaching for as long as I have, that's part of what makes it special, is the ability to develop relationships with these guys, see these guys develop from a wrestling standpoint, but also academically, maturity, and then go on to do some really great things with their lives. And all of these guys are going to do great things with their lives. So.
And that'll wrap it up here. Episode 83. Again, get those contributions in, as the end of April is the end of the fiscal year. Again, Tony, hit them with the website one more time.
SoutheastRTC.com.
So for Tony Robie, this is Jason Bryant. You've been listening to episode 87. Got some big news on this episode. It was pretty fun here on Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling. Hokie fans, listen to Inside Virginia Tech Wrestling anywhere you go by subscribing on Apple Podcasts. Go to InsideVirginiaTechWrestling.com/iTunes, or you can get the exclusive Android or iOS apps by going to InsideVirginiaTechWrestling.com.
Show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.